Good morning. Good morning. Glad to see you're all still awake for a while. Matthew chapter 2. I know some of you just said, what happened to Matthew chapter 1? Well, it took about 8 months to get through it, but we're okay. Thank you for one of you getting that joke. We're going to start looking at Christmas in spring. Or if you want to really get another title, we're looking at the childhood of Jesus. Now, here's what I have to do. I have to beckon your understanding, because what you've mostly seen, I don't know why it came up. What you've mostly seen or heard of is wrong. So we're going to have to look at Matthew from a better perspective and a better understanding, because most of you may have heard of Three Kings of Orient We Are. Not. Okay? That song is so wrong. I think there's one hymn book, I actually saw it and I ripped it out of it. But I didn't look what was on the other side, so we're missing 2 songs in whatever hymn book that is, because it doesn't make any sense. I grew up, I'm just going to tell you a little something about myself. I grew up in South Florida. On January of each year, the Catholic Hispanic people celebrate Three Kings Day. Okay? That's not in the Bible. Okay? And a lot of things you get from Catholics are not in the Bible. So we're going to look through this part and grab some things and understand what the Bible has to say, because we want to be people of the Word. So we're going to have to look at some of these things. So we're going to Matthew chapter 2. I'm going to read the first 6 verses. We are not getting through them today. I wasn't planning on it anyway. So we're going to take some time. We're going to take the same approach. We're going to ask some questions and answer them in a little different manner as we go through chapter 2 and 3. Verse 1 begins, Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. And when Herod the king heard it, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And gathering together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he began to inquire of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they said to him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah. For out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. What a wonderful passage of Scripture. It's not to be just looked at Christmas time, but all the time. One of the things we're going to look at is this where we've been. We've looked at the genealogy. Remember, in the genealogy, it's all about son of David, son of Abraham. Jesus is the rightful heir to the throne, and he is Jewish. Secondly, we saw the record of the conception and birth in Matthew, and we understand that Jesus was virgin conceived, given forth as a child that was... I don't know who's tapping. Oop. I don't even know if Ben's up there. Okay. Anyway, we're going to have to deal with that. It's not me. Maybe it is. Whatever. We'll deal with it. Wow, we just went a long way. Here's where we're going, though. Here's what we're going to look at in chapter 2, chapter 3, so on and so forth. We're going to look at the childhood of Jesus. That's where we're starting this morning. We're going to look at the preparation for ministry in chapter 3 and 4. In chapter 3, we have the forerunner announced, who is John the Baptist. Then we have his baptism, Jesus' baptism, where the king identifies with his subjects. We have his temptation in chapter 4, where he's shown to be morally qualified to be the king. And in Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5 through 7, what it's like in the king's kingdom. We're going to have to do a lot of work with that, because most of you think today we live by the Sermon on the Mount, which is wrong. But we'll look at that. All these show that Jesus is the right to be king of Israel. There's 23 verses, 3 parts. So if we want to look at this, we have the visit of the Magi, or as I like to say, Magoo. Because in the single, it's Magoo. I think it's funny. Secondly, we have the exit to Egypt, and then we have Herod's infanticide and Joseph's return to Nazareth. That's kind of just gives us a feel for the chapter. We're all pretty familiar with the Magi. Somewhat, but probably wrong. Here's key things we've got to look at in this chapter. We're going to talk about the Herods. I didn't make a mistake. Herods. We're going to have to talk about who this Herod is, who this guy is, because from this time on, Israel is ruled. Is it good? Nope. Maybe it is. Oh, you know something? When something unscrews, that's not part of this. Wow. How's that? Yeah. So it was me. I lay claim to the problem. Where was I? Herods. We're going to talk about the Herods. And the whole family of Herods, they will rule when the time Jesus is on earth. And then we're going to talk about the Magi, the star. What is the star? It's pretty fun because if it was a star that was over the house, it would have fried it. I don't know if you know anything about stars. Stars aren't little. They come over. Stars are pretty big. Every morning and every afternoon and every late evening, you'll see one. It's out there. So, dreams, prophecy, and Nazarene, or Nazareth. We could put Nazareth in there. The point of this chapter is the reception of the promised king. That's the point of the chapter. What is the reception of this promised king? That's what we're going to be focusing on. So let's kind of, before we do the questions, let's kind of do a quick run through this chapter. Let's kind of set the pace, and I'm going to try and do Matthew chapter 2, 1 through 12 really quick. Okay? What we have is, as we've looked at chapter 1, where Matthew was presented the genealogy of the king, we arrive at chapter 2, where this king is presented and what that reception is like. In Matthew chapter 2, it addresses the emphasis on the royalty of Jesus with absolute clarity. The genealogy screams son of David. And chapter 2, where he is born king of the Jews. Where is he? Born a king of the Jews. Jesus is the very expected Messiah of Israel. Matthew clearly quotes or uses allusions to the Old Testament more than any other gospel writer. We open this chapter with unexpected visitors, the Magi from the east, going straight to Herod's front porch, and this brings Herod into a state of absolute fear. So Herod invites religious leaders of his time to come and answer as to where this child was to be born, this Messiah. They show no curiosity, just state the facts of Micah 5:2, a prophecy that plots the exact location of the birth of Messiah. They do not even follow the Magi to this location. And again, God tells us the clear rejection of the religious leadership and his scriptures, so they do not seek the arrival of the king or the Emmanuel, God with us. As they focus on the location, Herod sets his claws into this supposed king with a plan of evil. He asks the Magi to return, so he, Herod, can go worship this king too. But his plan is nothing but eradication of threats to his throne. There will be no rival to Herod's throne. History has proven such. The Magi find this king, worship him, present him with gifts, then are warned in a dream of Herod's plot and return home via a different route. We will travel to Jerusalem, down to Bethlehem. This new family escapes to Egypt. Then once the threat is over, they will return to Nazareth, where Jesus will be called a Nazarene. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So let's look at some questions we're going to have to ask ourselves. These are the questions of Matthew 2, 1 through 12. I haven't got past verse 12. How do we assess what time the Magi visited the king? When was it? Some people think the second the shepherd showed up at the manger scene, so did the Magi, and some people say much later, and therefore we have to ask ourselves what was going on, how many Magi there were, what was going on. Who is this Herod? What do we know about this Herod? Who are the Magi? What about the star? We're going to kind of do a little bit of astronomy when we deal with this. Why was Herod so troubled and all Jerusalem with him? What is worship? They came to worship the king. What did they do? What is that worship? Where was the family residing at? What about Herod's plot? What does it involve? What are these three gifts? Why are there three? What are they for? What's the purposes of them? And we're going to talk about Gentile and dreams from God. And you'll see what that means when we get to it. Several things will come into view in this chapter. One of the things that come into view is religious leaders are totally indifferent, which one day leads to the crucifixion of Christ. The leadership were not seeking him. The leadership didn't care. The leadership knew, and what I mean by the Jewish leadership was mostly the religious leaders, knew very much what the scriptures had said and were unaffected by them as they were being fulfilled in their very day. On the other hand, we have a welcome reception of the Magi, who were more likely Gentile people from the east, and we would consider today a mystical group of people, not people looking for a king, which is fascinating in itself. So as we look at these questions, problems also arise that come out of this. First of all, we have a custom of that there being, these were three kings. Nowhere in Scripture does it say these are kingly people at all. And we'll talk about that as we talk about the Magi. Nativity scenes that are set up during Christmas. Many of you may have a couple. My wife loves collecting some of these. And I have a tendency to move pieces of the Nativity in other parts of the house. So when she set up one year, the kid said, "What happened to the Magi?" I go, "They're in another room." sort of a little west of here kind of thing. And you'll see why we said that. You have to rethink where Jesus and Mary were and why they were there and what was going on. And we'll talk about this because one of the things is people have a custom of Mary and Joseph being in some stable-like area, a bunch of animals around them, and there's no room in the inn. The innkeeper shuts the door in their face, and they're left out in the streets of Bethlehem with no place to go. Oh my, oh me. And I don't think my God would ever set them up in a situation like that. We have to grab the word and get a better understanding of what was going on. So what I'm going to do as we go through this, I want to go through it verse by verse. And again, I'll include all the language stuff in there so that those that get the slides can have the language. And we'll go back and forth like this and say certain things about the text because I want us to understand. For instance, we're going to go verse 1. So those of you that have your Bibles open, we're in verse 1. And verse 1 says, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, Magi of the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying..." Okay, here's the interesting thing that you'll get when you study a little bit of languages. This word is day, D-E. I know this is going to be so spiritually grasping of all of you, but I want you to understand how the chapter opens because I think it's important. Day is an adversative only to the extent of taking the attention off one topic and fixing it on another connected and kindred topic. In other words, what's happening is we just had a shift of topics. Now, if you didn't have chapter and verse breaks, which we luckily have, you would see in the Greek, we're just changing discussions. We're going from one subject, which is, bless you, the genealogy, to another subject, which has to do with the presentation of the king. In verse 13, you'll have the same thing. You have another break. These are dramatic breaks. It's saying we're going from one topic to another topic. So we have a topic shift. That's all that this chapter opens up with. We've left off on the genealogy, and now we enter probably the early childhood of Jesus. How early? I have no clue. And we'll talk about that as we go through this. But we have this drama that unfolds. We have Magi coming to worship, and we have Herod going to kill. Those are the two dramatic effects of chapter 2. And this all begins in Jerusalem, the city of David. Fascinating thing, if you look through the Davidic kings, only 2 kings were born in Jerusalem. In Bethlehem. I'll get this right. Only 2 kings were born in Bethlehem. All the rest were born in Jerusalem. David and Jesus. And you've got to say, what brought this family there? What happened to occur, so that would occur? And this, but Jerusalem became known as the city of David because of what David did as he ruled and reigned over Israel from Jerusalem. And the Magi, as they had traveled, assumed capital city would be placed for the king to be born. Listen to this. They knew Jerusalem was capital city. How come the rest of the world doesn't know that still? What I'm basically saying, at that time, known time, these travelers that came from way in the east knew that a king would be born in Jerusalem. So who's Herod? Let's kind of talk about Herod, because we're opening up with this understanding of in the days of Herod the king. This is a lot of history, but I'm going to tell you, this guy is the craziest guy you'll ever meet when you open up the New Testament. There's been crazy people, This guy's a lunatic. He's called Herod the Great. If you look through your different well, I got one here. Let's jump to this real quick. He's called Herod the Great. He's on the top of the charts. He was a murderous. In his brief history, he was a murderous thug that was once referred to as Augustus, the Roman emperor, said it is safer to be Herod's pig than to be Herod's son. In Greek, it's a play on the word huios, which is son. I can't remember what pig was, but it's a play on Greek words. So it's safer to be his pig than his son. Herod was an Edomite whose father was Antipater, who helped Julius Caesar conquer Egypt. When he helped Julius Caesar conquer Egypt, Julius Caesar, for his service, appointed him procurator of Judea, Samaria, and Galilee. Basically, he was a treasurer. He held all the money and accountabilities of the province of the Roman Empire. In other words, Roman Empire owned everything. They gave a little smidgen of this so this guy can be comptroller, I guess is the best way to call it today. Antipater then appoints his sons to rule under him. Herod was 26 when he ruled over Galilee. After his father's death, he went to Rome to seek appointment as king. He became king by Roman decree in 40 BC. So we have this governor, 47 to 37, 40 BC. Here's the interesting thing. When you get numbers of this era, we have calendar problems, so they're going to be off a couple of years. Just be careful of that. And some people think Jesus was born on 0. Just so you know, there is no 0. It goes from 1 BC to 1 AD, so there's no 0. So, but we have calendar issues, and so the best we can do is he's about 40 BC. He becomes king by Octavian, who names him Herod the Great as king of the Jews. So he is, listen, king of the Jews when the Magi come and say, who's king of the Jews? Where is he born? And Herod's going, what? So you understand right away the tension of the plot. In 30 AD is when he's named that king. So from 30 AD, 30 BC. He dies in 4 BC in Jericho shortly after the visit of the Magi and the birth of Jesus. So we know he dies at that time. So Jesus has got to be born before 4 BC. Just so some of you that think he's born on 0. Okay? To solidify his power, he divorces his first wife, Doris, and sent her and his son away from the court and married this young lady, Mariamne. Mariamne basically is Homoousian princess. Basically, the Homoousians were the religious class of Jews at that time. And she was known for her beauty, but obviously pictures don't do justice. Unless what beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and I'm not beholden much in that picture. So, the union that Herod had made was directly to end a feud with the Hasmoneans, a priestly family, but he did deeply love her, yet love is an interesting thing. Herod was referred to as the Great, first of all, by Bill, and we'll get back to that in a second, because he had many building projects. As if you go to Israel today, they will take you to various things that Herod built that are still around, kind of things. He was a great builder. He made massive fortresses, splendid cities. He even refurbished the existing temple to its wonderful grandeur at the time of Jesus. He even built a large seaport between Haifa and Joppa, and if you go to that seaport today, you can see this waterwork that's basically this thing that carried water from port to port, and it's still standing, and you say, how did they do that? And I don't know, I'm not an engineer, especially that kind of an engineer, and it's just interesting to see that. In the middle of the Judean desert, he built a great palace. Some of them say that part of his fortress was also known as Masada. So, another one place he built. Unfortunately, this man was dark and cruel and mentally unstable, and deceit ran through his family. His sister Salome, not his great niece Herodian's daughter Salome, who later has to do with John the Baptist. They don't know how to get different names, I guess. They didn't get one of those name books for babies. Salome poisons Herod's mind about Mariamne and her 2 sons, her grandfather and her grandmother, so Herod just murders them all. Takes them all out. Herod had 8 other wives, 10 in total, of 14 children. At the time of the Magi's visit, Herod probably had arterioscoliosis. I get it right. He was in great pain and in mental and physical, and he had also mental and physical disorders. He was a sick madman who was doing nothing but pure evil. He even attempted suicide, but obviously came up short. His realm was divided between his 3 sons, Herod Philip, Archelaus, and Antipas. And we'll get to that when we get to those points of those Herod leaders together later. So this is what the Magi faced as they went to Herod, or went into that area. One more thing. Herod had a great fear because of what occurred earlier in his reign with the Parthians. The Parthians were the heirs of the ancient Persian Empire east of Judea and Galilee. During the time of Daniel, the Persians had allied with the Medes. Along with the Medes, there was a tribe called the Magi. The Magi, later called, were a priestly tribe that by the time of the Babylonians and Persian empires had risen to a place of significance and prominence and in the political realm of the Parthian Empire. So I want us to get, these are not little guys that just come in bearing a couple of little gifts, parting gifts for the party, okay? These are big people with a lot of status. Look with me. Oh, no, I think I got it here, don't I? No. Yeah, there it is. Jeremiah 39:3 says this. Then all the officials of the king of Babylon came in and sat down in the middle gate. Nergal-Sharezer, Samgar-Nebu, they got to change these names, Sarsikim, and the Rabsaris, and Nergal-Sharezer, the Rabmag. The Rabmag is a great Magi, a great Magi. Rab means greatness, so when you see rabbi, it's a great one. Rabbi's a great one. Rabmag and all the rest of the officials of the king of Babylon. And then it says similar thing in Jeremiah 9:13. So we know that these great, I don't want to say magicians, because people say, oh, look, Magi means magician. It does not mean that. What it means is the chiefs or princes of Babylonia. These were high officials with a lot of status and a lot of pull. In Jeremiah's time, these were coming, what was happening at that time, they were coming to besiege Jerusalem, and Jeremiah lists the leaders who came to present their mandates. So this Rabmag and Rabsaris, the great eunuch and the great Magi, were representatives of the king. They were known, listen to this, as kingmakers. This group of guys are known as kingmakers. And they're coming to Jerusalem to say what? Where is he who was born King of the Jews? And their job is to do what? Make kings. So who are the Magi? Now, I think we have to back up. First of all, they're not saints of the Catholic Church. It's not happening. They entered the picture about the 7th century. So if anybody knows anything about that, that's way after we have most of the texts put together that would now make our Bible. Malchor was basically a Persian scholar. Kasbar, any variation of spelling, I've seen spelling I don't know how many different ways. He was known as maybe an Indian scholar. These aren't real people, though. I want you to understand this. This is who they're associated with. And Balthasar, basically a Babylonian scholar. And those are the 3 artistic renditions of who they are. They were probably by tradition astrologers because they said something about a star. I think that's a little overrated because every time you hear something about a star, it doesn't make you an astrologer. Tonight, if you go out and look at stars, you don't become an astrologer. But now, if you see something different in the sky, that just means what? You've seen something different in the sky. Something's going on. Were they looking for things in the sky? Well, probably. We'll look at Daniel. Daniel 12. Now, if you could read this, you just pass the eye test, you get your driver's license. In Daniel 12, Daniel 2, 12 through 27, it says, because of this the king became indignant and very furious and gave orders to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Wise men, Magi. Okay? So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them, because Daniel was one of the Agag at that time. Then Daniel replied with discretion and discernment to Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, who had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He said to Arioch, the king's commander, for what reason is the decree from the kings so urgent? Then Arioch informed Daniel about the matter. So Daniel went in and requested of the king that he would give him time in order that he might declare the interpretation of the dream to the king. Then Daniel went into the house and informed his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, better known as Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, about the matter, so that they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel said, let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. It is he who changes the times and the epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings. Interesting. He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. It is he who reveals the profound and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and power. Even now you have made known to me what we requested of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and spoke to him as follows: do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me into the king's presence, and I will declare the interpretation of the king. Then Arioch hurriedly brought Daniel into the king's presence and spoke to him as follows: I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can make the interpretation known to the king. The king said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered before the king and said, as far as the mystery about the king has inquired, neither wise men, conjurers, magicians, nor diviners are able to declare it to the king. So basically, and the reason I put this in here is at that time, wise men, conjurers, magicians were separate words, and diviners. They're not all the same thing. They're different classes of people that could do certain things. And if you just think about it, wise men were wise men. Okay? So that's what we have. Daniel would have died without... Daniel would not have died, let's do it this way, without passing on the prophecies of the Old Testament concerning Messiah, because he wrote them. Let me go to this one. This is what Daniel wrote in chapter 9, verse 24. 70 weeks we have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the peoples of the Prince who is to come to destroy the city and sanctuary, its end will come, and with the flood even to the end there will be war, desolations are determined. And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to the sacrifice and grain offerings, and on the wing of abominations will come one who will make desolate, even until a complete destruction. One is decreed, is poured out to the one who makes desolate. So basically, Daniel knows about the coming Messiah, knows about the time frame, he doesn't have to go and read, oh, by the way, a book of the month, if you want to read something, The Silence of God by Sir Robert Anderson, great book, but he also wrote a book on the exact time of this prophecy in Daniel when he called it the coming king. And when you look at it, it gives the exact timing when Jesus would enter in the triumphal entry. So when you do the math, if Daniel knew that in Daniel's time, he would have passed on his information in what we call wise men class that Daniel probably would have held, because Daniel was in court for many years. And the Old Testament does have Gentiles coming to believe in a future Davidic king. These aren't the first ones that would do that. Magi often under the Parthian Empire grew more and more powerful and became kingmakers themselves, and gained power because of their approval on who they put their hand upon to be king. So thus far, now taking our attention to the new subject, after Jesus is born in Bethlehem, the days of a madman named Herod the Great, Magi, wise men by tradition, religious leaders from past, who tried to interpret dreams. A ruling class of the Parthians from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, now do you understand the angst of Herod as these guys pulled in? Now, many of you have seen cartoons or depictions of 3 guys on 3 camels. I would not be, if I was Herod, and knowing as ruthless as Herod was, these guys wouldn't have made it out of the place. They wouldn't have gotten out. Now, many people say they really didn't actually go before Herod. They just came into Jerusalem asking, where is he who's born King of the Jews? The message got to Herod when he heard it, and I kind of understand that. I don't know if they approached Herod directly, but if they did or didn't, Herod didn't stop them, because they came in probably a very large caravan. What kind of a caravan would you have if you were toting gold? Through areas that were notorious for robberies. You would have a few, what we would call them, Arabian thugs to protect you and what you were carrying. And those of you that think they brought Jesus gold in a box about this big, forget it. That's not what you bring a king. You understand what I'm saying? We know from Jesus' life, one of the things we'll see is when Mary and Joseph went to present Jesus at the temple, he was 8 days old. Then they come back to make the sacrifices for purification after Mary's probably 33rd day, according to Leviticus. And she's purified, and they come in, and their sacrifices they bring are doves. The cheapest thing you could bring as a poor person to make purification. So they had no money. So we know that Jesus was at least 33 days old. He was not a babe in a manger. Okay, so kind of did this. So upon their visit, Herod gets a visit from these guys. Somehow, some way, he gets word of it. Some estimate between 50 and 100 people were arrived in this caravan. So now let your imagination stretch. A herd of camel, a lot of carrying beasts of burden, a lot of guys with long swords and short swords and whatever else defense equipment they could have. And it looked like they were coming for an invasion. And that kind of scared Herod, because Herod had pseudo power. Herod couldn't do anything that Rome disapproved of, and if he did, he'd lose his head. And yet at the same time, he wanted to show he was a thug enough himself to keep people from revolting. And now what do you do when you're confronted with a group of people that's come from the east, and you know who they are? It's a sizable group of well-armed people carrying gold. These magi from the east who saw the star that would drag them west. Now kind of picture this. They're in the east. That's when they saw the star. They went west. Because some people say the star is in the east. That would get them in the wrong direction. Kind of get this so far? Because Israel is, just so you know, west of Israel is water. So if they were standing in the middle of the sea and said, we saw the star in the east and we rowed ashore, I can understand it. But they came from the east, so they had to see the star in the east. So let's go to verse 2. And all this stuff is extra stuff. If you get the PowerPoint, you get all this extra stuff for no extra cost. So as they say, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. Now it's a kind of bunch of fun things, because the literal Greek says this. The literal Greek, if you were going to go back and read this without all the out of the parts of speech and transliteration and numbers and all that stuff, it would say this. Saying, where's the having been born one, King of the Jews? So his title was having been born one, King of the Jews. He was born to be king. He wasn't born to die. He was born to be king. He would eventually die, because that's part of what he came to do. But he came to live as king. It's a fascinating word that we have here for the word born. The word born here is T-I-K-T-O. Something simple, but it's not a usual word for born. It's normally used only of a mother having a child. Later, Matthew will mention Mary, but not Joseph, remaining focused on the miracle of the birth of the king. So this word that says that there having been born one king only refers to mommy. See, language will make it solid to you. Where's Joseph? When we enter this picture, it doesn't say anything about him at the very start. He will later, because he's given a dream to get out of Dodge and get out of Bethlehem and head to Egypt. Can't do Dodge, that won't work. If we were dealing with the word for father, instead we have that in chapter 1. Geneo has to do with father birthing sons. Verse 16, once again, if you go drop your eyes down to verse 16, it says, Then Herod saw that he had been tricked and wanted to basically sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem, all in environs, from 2 years old and under, having according to that which has been ascertained by the Magi. So we know it's in a 33 to 2 year envelope that these guys showed up. Okay, so hang with me. Verse 2 gives us a tale of two kings. Verse 2 is giving us a tale of two kings, because here's what's happening. Confronted not with a question, if you notice this shouldn't be here. Punctuation is inserted by translators. Greek doesn't have punctuation. So when we look at this word and understand this statement, they're telling him, we want to know where the king is. They're not asking him, is the king being born? And kind of where is he? But they're probably stating it much like, which is interesting, because the Magi didn't call Herod king of the Jews. The Magi never said the one who is the heir to the throne. The Magi never said that they might be looking for the king of the Jews, that there's a possibility he is or isn't. This large band of valiant men came seeking the one who is the king of the Jews. Do you hear the difference? There wasn't a doubt of who he was. They just want to know what location he might be at. Because here's what the star did. The star brought him there. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The Magi also knew the child was by birthright, he had to be king. Herod was not king by birthright, he was a puppet. He was put in place because he asked the Roman government, like we said earlier, to be put in as king, and they installed him as king. They said, for we saw, now this is important, I love this. They saw his star. Not a star. It was his star. Now, I'm kind of semi-stupid, so you got to bear with me for a minute. When I look outside, I can't name one star from another. And some of you that may be really understanding of stars and say that's Pleiades, and that's Orion's belt, and that's the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and not so dipped. The North Star. You guys got all of which is also, bless you, also the North Star's Polaris, right? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, we're good so far. Well, some of us can identify them somewhat. But if you went out to the sky and said, this one's different, it's his star, how would you know that? There was some divine intervention there, or something different was happening in the sky. And I'm going to answer it right now. I have no idea. All of you are just waiting, what's the star? I'm going to give you some ideas and in our closing moments, but I have no idea. First of all, stars can't come close. Do you know anything about stars? Anybody know anything about stars? They're big suns. Okay, if our sun got any closer, and it's 93, million miles away? I don't know if you know what that is. It's a long walk on a bad day. But if it got any closer, you would... It'd be like a fly in a nightlight. What are those zappers called? That's it. You'd be nothing. So the sun's got to be at a certain place, and the sun right now is our nearest real star. That's as close as it can get. When I look at the sun, it doesn't pinpoint anything to me. That's what we know as a star. If it went any further away, we wouldn't be having church tomorrow. We'd all freeze to death. So God's got us in a perfect place, 93 million miles away. I don't know if any of you were trying to take that, but kind of think stars. Stars do guide and even guide to specific places, but not to an exact home and over a home. That's what it says here. You know, if you go out at night and get a sextant and kind of lay out, if you're really good with what angles and that kind of science, you could figure out where you're at and what your location is and where you want to go, which direction you have to go. Thank God for what? Google. And now my Google actually does live AR, so I can say, oh, there's a building. That's the building I got to go to. Okay? I don't know if yours does that. Get a better phone. But stars are based on light. You ready for this? Stars are based on light. Only light that's shown over the home in the Old Testament is known as a Shekinah glory. The only light in the Old Testament that shined over a home was the Shekinah, over the tabernacle, the temple. With me so far? This star had to be supernatural beyond any question, because it traveled in the wrong direction. They came from the east to the west. That messes up star rotation. You know that, right? Anybody know anything about science? It's going the wrong way. It had to go this way. And it had to go a specific direction as they went. I don't know who saw this star, because the only one that says they saw the star was Magi. Jesus is the glory of God, if you don't know this. He's the very glory of God. And when we beheld him, we beheld the glory of God. And John 1:14 said he's the very glory of God. In Matthew 17, it says he pulls apart his flesh and he transfigures, and they beheld his glory. This light, this Shekinah that burst forth. Getting the picture I'm going to give you? Jesus even calls himself the light of the world. Now I'm going to give you some fascinating facts. Okay? Somewhat fascinating facts. Light came before light bearers. You know anything about the order of creation? Light came first, then light bearers. So, if we were to talk about... Do I have that slide here, Liz? Yes. Watch this. So God said, let there be light, and there was light. And that was the first evening, and there was morning in the one day. Where's the sun? Where's the moon? That's day 3. Right? Or 4? Day 3 or 4. I'm going to mess up something again this morning. Let's talk about a light year. Ready for this? This is scientific. I love this stuff. Light year is an astronomical unit of distance equivalent to the distance that light travels in 1 year, which is 9.4607 times 10 to the 12th kilometer. Interpreted, 6 trillion miles. Alpha Centauri is our nearest star other than the sun. You with me? Our nearest star. The nearest star to Earth is Alpha Centauri in a triple star system. About 4.3 light years away, one of these stars, Proxima Centauri, is slightly closer at 4.24 light years. So if the Magi saw a real star and they were traveling from the east, the Lord would have had to send it before he created the earth. You with me? So this was supernatural no matter how we want to look at this. Right? So when we think about it, what is the star? I have no idea. My personal opinion was it was a supernatural something that traveled to guide them to where they had to be, to Jerusalem, and then it was the Shekinah over that house to say, this is the house. I don't know who saw it other than them. But the focus isn't on the star in the sky, it's the one in the house. Because they said they came to worship him. And this is what we'll pick up next week with the Magi coming to worship him. We're going to stand and sing and pray. Pray, stand, and sing. I don't know where the song is. Oh, misguided me. We're going to stand and sing something. It's going to be a surprise. I don't know. You guys hit the paper. Oh, we're going to sing Through It All. Page 507 in your hymn book. We're going to go through it 2 times, right? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time again as we've looked into Matthew 2 and getting some new insights that you're a God who had a predicted exact day for your son to come in. He is a king. He's acknowledged as king. He will always be king. And Father, as we look into this and grasp this earnestly, one of the things we should also worship him. in not only one single day, but every day and every moment of that day. In Jesus' name, amen.